Hello there. Today, in light of the upcoming Kjerag 2.0 event featuring Deacon Brecker, I'll be recapping the Kjerag lore we have so far. By now, Break the Ice is a pretty old event, so I'm sure most people have some idea of what happened during it, so I'll try to keep things brief. Don't forget to turn on captions for an easier read. I've added timestamps for different sections of the video as well if you'd like to skip to certain parts. Enjoy the video. As usual, let's go through a little bit of Kjerag history and culture before diving into the events. Kjerag is a Terran country bordering Colombia, Casimirs, and Victoria. It is said that the goddess Kjeragandra led her people to settle in the snowy mountains, and she ruled the nation until she decided to ascend into the heavens amongst a blizzard. Based in a snowy area, Kjerag is, not unlike Late Reno, rather closed off from outside affairs. In the snow realm, they are largely unaffected by outside catastrophes, and hardly even establish contact with the outside world. As such, their technology, their houses, etc., are all rather old-fashioned, people still relying on oil lamps for light instead of electric ones, along with other examples. Although, this starts to change with the political shifts. Now we'll talk briefly about Kjerag's politics. Kjerag has a strong religious influence, deeply entrenched in their belief of the goddess Kjeragandra. They have a Carlin saintess who acts as their spiritual leader and political figurehead. The citizens of Kjerag devote themselves to Kjeragandra. Notably, a grand ceremony is held annually that commemorates the day of Kjeragandra's appearance. On that day, the three clans of Kjerag organize the Holy Hunt, where the saintess hunts down legendary Tjajatas to bring good fortune. About the political rulers. When Kjeragandra ascended to the heavens, she appointed three great noble families to rule jointly as Kjerag's leaders, the Silvrashes, the Brown Tails, and the Pale Rocks. Pictured here are the present-day leaders of the families. In addition to the Carlin saintess, Kjerag has the Vinebear Court, the leading faction consisting of Kjeragandra's priests, priestesses, and elders. The court acts as the highest authority, although they lean heavily to the conservative side out of fear and respect to Kjeragandra. Directly under them in terms of power is the Tri-Clan Council, made up of the three families mentioned earlier. However, the saintess holds the highest power in the country, above both the council and the court. Alright, that's enough of the politics for now. Let's go into the more recent history, that happened a few decades before Break the Ice. While Kjerag enjoyed many years of peace being secluded from the outside world, this was not a state which Kjerag could remain in forever. The geopolitics around Kjerag grew more and more tense, with the rise of Colombia and the fall of Gaul. Not to mention, Kjerag in this closed-off state couldn't benefit from the technologies and products from outside. Out of the Kjerag political heads, the Silvrash family was the most prominent figure in campaigning for the reform of Kjerag to open its borders to the outside. However, they were being heavily resisted by the Vinebear Court, who insisted on devoutly following Kjeragandra's last teachings, even if it meant never changing or improving. How did all of the political figures involved respond to this? The Pale Rocks, led by Arknights Pale Roche, does so because their family has always been ardently conservative and sees the Silvrash's attempt to industrialize the nation as blasphemy to Kjeragandra. The great elder of the Vinebear Court is firmly of the belief that the current stagnation is how things were meant to be, believing that faith is the fundamental reason why Kjerag is Kjerag. Many of the last few chosen saintesses were perhaps too insufficient of will, too unwilling to question this, which may be a product of how closed off Kjerag is, and typically ended up being political figureheads managed by the elders. The Brown Tails are personally the most interesting family to me. They are currently ruled by Radatos, the matriarch. Radatos is generally seen as a sneaky, manipulative leader who resorts to dirty measures, but in reality she seems to me to be a leader that is just trying her best to keep her clan alive, among the clash between the Silvrashes and the Pale Rocks. In addition, for Radatos as a person, she quietly envies her sister Cyrus for her freedom and her good romantic life with her husband, while Radatos has neither. In addition, Radatos, as revealed at the end of Break the Ice, actually might have agreed with the opening up of Kjerag to the outside world. She has a desire to explore the outside world and even studied economics on her own. However, her desire to not show weakness to her sister also leads to Cyrus occasionally making rash actions to try and prove to her that she's capable of helping the Browntail family. And last but not least, the Silvrashes. Since their relationships are the most complicated one, and also the main focus of this story, I'll avoid the 20-minute essay and talk about it as we go. So let's get into the actual story now, in chronological order. Some years ago, while tensions were at their highest between the Silvrashes and the other ruling parties, the leader at the time, Olafur Silvrash, and his wife, Elizabeth, were killed in a train accident, leaving behind their 3 children, Insiads, Silvrash, Enya, Permanix, and Ensia, Cliffheart. Still children at the time, they were raised in Kjerag by their uncle. Unfortunately, soon after their parents' death, the Edelweises, who worked as the Silvrashes' bookkeepers, were falsely accused of murdering Olafur and Elizabeth. Although the charges were dropped due to a lack of evidence, the lasting damage was done. Rumors against the Edelweiss family started, eventually getting to the point where the family was forced to move out of Kjerag. That kind of rumors can clearly have a huge impact on a young child. We see it in Gnosis Edelweiss, the Edelweiss's only child, and Insiads's closest friend. The rumors got to a point that even he himself started to wonder if his parents were involved, and him being an unwitting accomplice. And yet, in a touching show of love even as a young child, Insiads declares that he would forgive him even if he was an accomplice. Talking about their dream to turn Kjerag into the most powerful country in the world, Gnosis tells Insiads that he'll study in Victoria and come back to Kjerag to fulfill their dream. Surprisingly, Insiads tells him that he's planning on doing the same, and promises to come and find Gnosis when that happens. Not everything is the same when Insio and Gnosis meet up in Victoria. Insiads notes that Gnosis has become much sharper and colder, while Gnosis also returns that Insiads has started to use his status as a weapon while he wouldn't have in the past. Yet, at the end of it, the two of them still acknowledge that they still have the same goal, and become partners in arms once again. The two of them proceeded to start Carlin Trade Commercial, taking their first steps. There's a manga that focuses on the establishing of Carlin Trade, involving Deacon Brecker, freshly recruited by Insiads from the Casimir's arena. I won't be covering that content now since it's more about Carlin Trade itself than Kjerag events, but I really highly recommend giving it a read. I'll leave the link in the description. The 3 of them are incredibly close, with Gnosis and Deacon Brecker perhaps being the only 2 people that Insiads trusts in wholeheartedly. Returning to Kjerag years later, Insiads convinces Radatos about the benefits of opening up Kjerag to the rest of the world. Radatos, although she did not follow him to Victoria to study, privately studied economics on her own while continuing to observe Carlin Trade's success. Originally, she sided with Insiads, believing that he intended all clans to join in, which could unite their families. However, over time while observing his behavior, she stopped working with them. Most people, Insiads included, believed that it was due to her desire for profit. However, Radatos actually did it out of fear, although this wasn't revealed until much later during Break the Ice. Choosing to put the safety and the existence of her own family of highest importance, she backs out of it and returns to the Great Elder's views of an unchanging Kjerag. Fast forward to present day where Insiads invites the Doctor to Kjerag, intending to have them witness the Tri-Clan Council. The party of Rhodes Island operators, Cliffheart, Ensia, Courier, Sharp, and later Aurora, travels to Kjerag to accept his invitation. We find Arknights and Radatos accusing Insiads of going against Kjeragandra's wishes, where Insiads holds that it has been answered for, with Gnosis being expelled from Carlin Trade. Arknights and Radatos push for Insiades to give up control of the valleys and mines, and even the Sildrash family seat in the Tri-Clan Council. Despite this, Insiades surprisingly says that he is willing to give up the valleys and the mines, but on the condition that it will not be to either family, but instead directly to the Vinebear court, for the Saintess to handle. Enya, the Saintess, and also Insiades' younger sister, is much more inquisitive and strong-minded than previous Saintesses. However, the Great Elder refuses to accept any proposal of change, fearing the collapse of Kjerag, and tells her that he always puts Kjerag's peace of mind first and foremost. Enya and Insiades have a very tense conversation afterwards, naturally, with Enya bearing a grudge against her brother. Insiades was the one to push Enya to become the Saintess, which effectively turned her impartial towards any of the families, including her own brother. In doing so, it also limited Enya's contact with Encia, their younger sister, and restricted her freedom. Although, Enya rose admirably to the occasion, as she did in the past, showing her determination to make the most of the circumstances and guide Kjerag to a better future. Insiades says that, after Gnosis's expulsion from Carlin trade, he intends to have an outside expert, the doctor, to look after the valleys and mines for the time being, but Arknights stops him, expressing suspicion that the outside expert could be another Gnosis on Insiades' payroll. Insiades has no choice but to agree, but he doesn't get enough time to convey this to the doctor and Encia. After the doctor leaves with Arknights' people, Insiades and Gnosis have a confrontation in the conference room for his sentencing, Insiades stating that he must account for the profits which his actions have caused Carlin trade, while Gnosis expresses disappointment in Insiades' willingness to throw him under the bus. Gnosis visits the Brown Tails, determined to expose Insiades for what he did to him, but leaves when he doesn't get a direct audience with Radatos. Radatos and Cyrus discuss this, debating whether or not to trust Gnosis. Now we see the benefits that Insiades' work reaped for the locals, a contrast to everyone else painting him as a villain who brought in unwanted things to Kjerag, particularly for the infected who found jobs, received medications, and payment there. Before the visit can end, some people posing as Insiades' people ambush the doctor's group, accusing the Pale Rocks of collaborating with the doctor to go against Insiades. Before the doctor can say anything, Sharp and Aurora break in and take the doctor away. The doctor sees through the ambush, however, saying that it's likely to be a ruse to make the Brown Tails look bad instead of an actual attack by the Brown Tails to incite a rift between the Pale Rocks and Sildrashes. On the other side of Kjerag, Gnosis gets an audience with Radatos. In order to prove his claims to her, he shows Radatos a railway that Insiades secretly constructed, in order to bring in military equipment and personnel. Forcing the Brown Tail's hand, he blows up the railway and the train moving on it, ensuring that the Brown Tails will have no choice but to work with him as they would now be linked to the explosion. However, this is not nearly enough to convince Radatos, who is still suspicious of Gnosis. They get interrupted when Gnosis introduces them to the military squad Insiades had trained in secret, named after the Kjerag legend, Tchagata. With no choice, Radatos is forced to engage and take the Tchagata prisoner. Insiades receives this report calmly, talking briefly about Kjeragandra's burdens and how, in his opinion, the Tri-Clan Council and the Vinebear Court had not been shouldering that burden for a long time now. Insiades receives this report calmly, talking briefly about Kjeragandra's burdens and how, in his opinion, the Tri-Clan Council and the Vinebear Court had not been shouldering that burden for a long time now, likely seen from their stagnation. On the next day, in preparation for the Holy Hunt and the transferal of power to happen on the day after, Insiades follows the tradition to walk up Mount Carlin while praying the entire way. Enya talks with Kjer, her maidservant, secretly the goddess Kjeragandra herself, and sighs about having to watch out for the elders. Enya displays surprise at Insiades showing more religious tendencies seemingly overnight, following the tradition to visit Mount Carlin. She reassures the Great Elder that she understands the significance of her speech, and also requests to use the hunting longbow in the holy hunt. To which the great elder instantly shows disapproval, citing the many years tradition as argument. Enya fiercely disagrees, stating that she would be leading by example, that maybe what Kjerag needs is a saintess who will convey her wrath. She remains resolute in the face of the great elder's disagreements that their faith cannot change. As the other two leaders, Radados and Arknights, wait for Ensiad's to make his way up to the top of the mountain, Sayura seeks out one of her most trusted subordinates, Monk. Ignoring the fact that Radados had previously told her to be careful of getting too close to her, Sayura confides in her and tells her to help her with creating a fine performance to bring honor to the Browntail clan and get back at her sister. Before meeting up with the others to begin the holy hunt, Ensiad's and the saintess meet. Enya tells him that she intends on joining the holy hunt personally, and Ensiad's momentarily pauses when Enya returns him with a similar line to what he would have said to her when suggesting that she become the saintess, that it is her responsibility. The siblings share a moment of similarity, a repeating theme throughout Break the Ice, that they have similar views but chose vastly different paths. During the holy hunt, Enya and Arknights have a heart-to-heart about why he opposes Ensiad's plans to open up Kjerag to the outside world. I really enjoyed this part of the story with how it gave us deeper insight into the two of them, so give it a read if you can. During the holy hunt, Arknights and Radados note a slightly unusual thing: the pack of beasts that they were to hunt for the holy hunt were unusually brutal, attacking the warriors on the front lines. The saintess herself saves two warriors from a beast with her hunting bow, and the warriors rally around her. As the holy hunt ends, a Silvrash warrior runs up to them and delivers news of Ensiad's being attacked by an assassin. Cutting to Ensiad's point of view, we realize that it is Monk, accusing him of doing damage to Kjerag, but we know from a conversation earlier that she was directed to do so by Gnosis. Monk has a strong moment of indecision, torn between following Gnosis's orders, that she has always placed at her highest priority, and Sayura's relationship with her. However, she chooses Gnosis, and leaps off the cliff instead of letting Ensiad's capture her. The news of Ensiad's getting attacked on the holy hunt spreads, and people start whispering about how it could have been the Browntails or the Pale Rocks looking to take up more Silvrash land. The rest of the ceremony proceeds as per normal. Valet, representing the Pale Roche clan, serves the great elder a cup of wine to represent a bountiful harvest. Radados offers a warming scarf to represent comfort and good health, and Ensiad's offers a small knife to represent peace. At this moment, Weiss, courier, approaches them, informing Ensiad's that the assassin had been found. When it was revealed to be Monk, Sayura stood up for Monk, however this caused the great elder to order Sayura to be detained, suspecting her in ordering Ensiad's assassination. The situation further deteriorates as the great elder shows symptoms of poisoning, found in the cup that Arknights presented to the elder. Kjerag civilians are in shock at seeing the betrayal of the two other clan leaders, turning against them and showing support for Ensiad's. At that moment, Gnosis shows up, urging Radados to make a choice as the flames have now been lit and Kjerag civilians would no longer stand by her side. When she remains undecided, he attacks Ensiad's himself, and fails. Left with no other choice, Radados and Arknights order their warriors to prepare for battle. Down below the mountain, the doctor recognizes that the entire show had been planned by Ensiad's from the very beginning, even including Gnosis's showing up. Unable to sit by and watch a war breaking out, the doctor convinces Sharp to rescue Arknights and Radados. Still in the Vinebear court, Enya's thoughts are in turmoil, completely aware of the growing unrest and impending revolution, observing the situation but unable to resist at the moment. Coming back to the aftermath of the two clan heads, Radados reminisces her childhood with Sayura, about how much Sayura cared for her. She dissuades Sayura from going to find Ensiad's and tells her she has her own plans. Coming to Arknights, Valet now reveals herself, reminding Arknights that her father died after being poisoned after being given the Great Elder's medicine, the same poison which she administered to the High Elder. Arknights realizes that he sent his own officer to his death with his own hands. Valet tries to dissuade him from fighting Arknights, saying that it was high time that Kjerag saw change for the better. Now, coming to Gnosis being locked up by Silverash warriors, we recognize that Gnosis has indeed been working with Arknights the entire time, allowing him to play the villain and help Arknights to flip the stage. Arknights, assured of his victory, reveals that he received a letter from Radados, where she claims to wish to pledge her allegiance to the Silverashes and to tell him the truth behind his parents' passing. Gnosis is reasonably wary and sighs that Arknights will one day die of his arrogance, but Arknights is assured that it won't happen today or this outing. Notably, Arknights acknowledges that had Radados come with him to study in Victoria, she might have changed her views instead of standing on the opposite side. Before attending to other matters, Gnosis visits Monk, giving her an apology for not telling her of his plan with Arknights. Monk is more hurt by his lack of trust than the fact that he used her for the plan. Once he leaves, Monk wonders aloud if she can still trust him or not. In their meeting, Radados tells Arknights the truth, that her grandfather had been planning to have Arknights' parents killed, with Arknights' father also acquiescing to the plan. He'd prepared the house they were currently in, a house that used to belong to the Edelweiss. However, when they died in a train accident, her grandfather then framed the Edelweisses for it. This is where Arknights and Radados have their heart-to-heart conversation, with a lot of the points which I mentioned about Radados earlier. Arknights admits that he has misjudged Radados, thinking her to be money-minded, but she had other concerns instead. He reminds her of the danger from other nations, and the fact that Kjerag is still oblivious to the danger right at its doorstep. Deacon Brecker and Cyrus rush in and rescue them, while other Kjerag subjects, upon witnessing this, start to turn on Radados and Cyrus, seeing that they had just tried to kill him in a burning house. Up in Mount Carlin, the Saintess announces to the elders that she will take charge of the court's decisions, with Kjerag's support. The doctor gathers Radados and Arknights, all of them acknowledging that Arknights has already won, but the best way to save themselves is to save the Saintess. They plan out an assault, diverging attention to an attempt to save Yucatan while the real forces scale Mount Carlin. In addition to the plans, the doctor also tells Aurora to sneak into the Silverash residence and find Encia, wanting her to find her sister. Encia agrees after some thought, telling Aurora that she can climb Mount Carlin on her own. Although Chester, their uncle, intervenes, he eventually sees Encia's determination and relents, telling the guards to stand down. He muses to himself, or to Olafur, that although the three siblings have done incredibly well in their own roles, the determination to reform had torn apart the family and the three siblings. Back to the Vinebear court, Enya and the dying Great Elder have a fierce conversation, where the Great Elder is insistent that Arknights still cannot win as he could not possibly defeat the faith that has stood for millennia. Enya disagrees, saying that nothing is inherently meant to be, and that it was time for the Vinebear court to change. She tells him that she will face Arknights, but not in the way that the Great Elder wishes, as the Saintess of Kjerag. Struggling through the blizzard starting to fall, Encia thinks about her time at Rhodes Island, waiting for letters from her sister. With sadness, she wonders if things had to turn out the way they had, and if so, why did it have to be her family that fell apart? As the youngest of the family, losing her parents, then watching her brother and sister turn into enemies, getting infected with oropathy, Encia has had her fair share of struggles. And perhaps the most painful part for her is that she's equally aware that, as much as she wants to, she cannot save her sister from the mountain, nor save her brother from going too far and permanently destroying their sibling relationship. Some distance away on Mount Carlin, Deacon Brecker and Sharp engage in combat. Deacon Brecker brings up some of her past, mentioning how Lythanens are incredibly adverse to anyone who cannot use arts, and being thrown aside until she found her skills in fighting. When the sisters reunite on the top of the mountain, Enya has a moment of realization about what she needs to do. As tensions draw to a head below the mountain, with Ensiad's himself meeting the doctor and Arknights, Enya puts the Silb rash guards protecting the court to sleep and descends the mountain. Kjerag, secretly the goddess Kjerag, muses on her thoughts, about how Enya and Ensiad surprised her with their views towards Kjerag, notably with Enya caring most about how to serve Kjerag's masses. She regrets being unable to guide Enya herself, but she still grants them help by clearing the pending blizzard. As the blizzard clears, halting all the fights breaking out around Mount Carlin, Enya descends, her presence causing all to stop. Arknights lays down his weapons and kneels before her, the Pale Roche warriors following suit, while Ensiad, however, does not take this as a loss. He steps forward and follows suit, taking a knee and offering his blessings to the saintess. Enya delivers a resounding speech, bringing an end to what would later be dubbed as the Snowcap Incident, reinterpreting Kjeragandra's teachings and declaring that the Vine Bear Court will tolerate the beliefs of outsiders towards Kjeragandra. The scene shifts to the Doctor and Ensiad's playing chess together after the Snowcap Incident. Ensiad admits to only needing the Doctor as a distraction for the Pale Roche clan, but he had indeed underestimated the Doctor's impact. Ensiad opens up about his real reasons for having been driven to such extremes, that Kjerag needed to change as quickly as possible without the luxury of time. As the story wraps up, Ensiad invites Gnosis to be his representative to Rhodes Island instead of staying in Kjerag and in infamy. Before leaving, Gnosis attempts to seek out Monk, but she has disappeared, leaving behind the dagger which he gave to her as a gift. Weiss, Courier, and Matterhorn appear as the Doctor is leaving, apologizing as employees of Rhodes Island. Last but not least, Encia voices her wish to have her brother and sister get along again like they used to, while the Doctor muses about the future of Kjerag with those two in their new positions. The story ends here, to be continued in the upcoming ride to Lake Silbernerz. Break the Ice is one of my absolute favorite Arknights stories. Apart from that amazing Gnosis plot twist, which I wish I hadn't spoiled myself for, so I could have experienced it wholeheartedly, I loved the way that they portrayed the fact that every party involved, the Silb Rashes, the Brown Tails, the Pale Rocks, the Vine Bear Court, all wished for Kjerag to be well, but all in different ways. Like I said, I personally love the Brown Tails for how they're written, Ratatos and Cyrus with their own personal struggles, Ratatos's reputation as money-hungry compared to her actual concerns, Cyrus's love for Monk which almost costs her dearly, and the way Ratatos even starts to wonder if Cyrus might actually make a better leader than her near the end of the event. Of course, the Silb Rash siblings' relationship is probably the bulk of the content and the primary focus of the event, but I expect there'll be more content of it in the rides to Lake Silbernerz, so perhaps I'll make a proper character/relationship analysis video after reading that. In the meantime, I love the way they represented the siblings and their common goal with different paths. Encia's struggle to help her siblings mend their relationship is just heartbreaking but heartwarming at the same time. I'll talk briefly about the relationship between Ensiad and Gnosis. The fact that their relationship held so close, despite public scrutiny and all odds being set against them, is truly remarkable. Their friendship, their common goal surviving the time that they spent apart, the trust they held in each other, Ensiad's reluctance to have Gnosis act as the scapegoat for their plans. The way Ensiad refuses to accept Gnosis being mistreated in Kjerag, and gives him the option to go to Rhodes Island to continue his research shows how much he cares about him. In addition, Gnosis and Monk, it looked terrible for him to abuse Monka's undying loyalty to him, it definitely was terrible, but at some level he did care about Monk, just not enough to show her that amount of trust. Well, Ensiad didn't tell Courier or Matterhorn about Gnosis's part of the plan either, so I can understand it, but the fact that Monk was a double agent between the Brown Tails and Gnosis definitely made her situation sadder. I'm sure Gnosis felt some level of concern and remorse, but Monk leaving was absolutely deserved. Can't wait for her to become playable one day. Last but not least, a few more extra words on Insyad's. I truly enjoyed the way that Break the Ice was kind of a bastard arc for him, and yet we still get to sympathize, or at least understand his goals. In the end, he does win, although not in the way he wants. He himself says that, in the past, he would have considered this a crushing defeat, but now, he thinks it might not be so definite. Despite all the harshness towards him, very well deserved, in this event, I'd still like to say that it was partly a product of circumstance. He knew fully well what he was doing when he burned relationships with his sisters and with the other clan leaders, until the point that his most trusted partners, and only people that can be called friends, are Gnosis and Deacon Brecker. Which also shows in his eagerness to befriend the Doctor, despite Gnosis's warnings about them. All in all, Insyad is an amazing, fascinating character, an attractive guy, smart, ruthless, cunning. The only downside is that being one of the early release characters, his files and voice lines don't really show the most about his personality, so I'm kind of guessing out here based on Break the Ice. Thank you for making it so far. I'll see you guys in Lake Silbernerts, wishing you all the best of luck in your polls.